Okay, so we're on to our next step of solving inequalities, and that is we are going to solve when we have the same variable on each side. Once again, this is something we've done with equations, so the process itself is not going to be new. We're just now going to perform it with an inequality. First thing I'm going to do is, of course, change my subtraction to addition with add a line, add a line. Draw my balance scale. Recall, we have to remove one of the variables on one side. We either have to get rid of the 3y or the negative 2y. Remember, it doesn't matter. Since most of us prefer to get rid of the variable on the left side, that's the way that I'm going to do it. So I need to get rid of the entire term 3y, so I have to add the opposite. The opposite of positive 3y is a negative 3y. I therefore need to balance my scale and add a negative 3y over here. That gives me 0 plus 5, and drop in that less than sign, because the only time I worry about switching is when I multiply, and I'm not even multiplying right now. This, if I add straight down, negative 2y plus negative 3y is negative 5y. Drop the plus negative 10 I did not use. 0 plus 5 is 5. And over here I still have negative 5y plus negative 10. Now this becomes a two-step, a standard two-step that we know how to solve. I'm going to get rid of addition first, so I'm going to add the opposite. I'm going to add 10 to each side. That will give me negative 5y equals 15. At this point, oops, excuse me, greater than 15. Gotta drop the inequality sign. At this point, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of negative 5 is negative 1/5. Now, as I said on the other video, anytime you multiply by the reciprocals where you got to, with an inequality, is where you have to stop and say, do I need to switch the sign or not? So I have to pause and say, did I multiply by a negative on both sides? If I did, I switch the sign. If it's a positive, I keep it. But this is a negative, so at this point, I need to switch my sign. I end up with y, that is going to be negative 3. So I end up with y is less than negative 3. Now to check, I need to pick a number less than negative 3. So I'll pick negative 5. So negative 2 times negative 5 plus negative 10. Will that be larger than 3 times negative 5 plus 5? Well, negative and a positive 10 plus a negative 10 would give me 0. 3 times negative 5 is a negative 15, and negative 15 plus 5 would give me negative 10. And 0 is, in fact, greater than negative 10, so my answer checks. Once again, you got to plug it in on both sides, and you have to make sure that this side will be greater than that side in this specific case. So as you can see, the steps are the same as solving an equation. You got to remember this step here, where you have to get rid of one of the variables on each side by adding the opposite, and then you go through the process. I'm going to do one more example. This one is going to be with the idea that I might have to simplify first, something else we did with equations that can come up at any time. So here, as you can see, I'm going to have to do some work first. I can't draw my balance scale right away. First thing I'm going to do is change these to addition with add a line, add a line. Now, I'm going to have to do my distributive property. Now remember, you have to distribute the multiplication to both. 4 times 2n is 8n, plus 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Keep my sign. Distribute over here. 4 times n is 4n. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Okay, now I can draw my balance scale. Once again, I have a variable on each side, so I need to get rid of the variables on one of the sides. I'm going to get rid of the left side. Add the opposite. Opposite of positive 4n is a negative 4n. 0. Drop this sign. 0 plus negative 4. Over here, 8 plus negative 4n is a positive 4n plus negative 4. 0 plus negative 4 is negative 4. So at this point I have 4n plus negative 4 is less than or equal to negative 4. This is a standard two-step. I'm going to solve. I have to add the opposite. The opposite of negative 4 is a positive 4. So that's going to give me 4n less than or equal to negative 4 plus 4 is 0. I have a 0 over here. That's okay. At this point I have to multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. I have to stop and ask myself, am I multiplying each side by a negative? Do I need to switch the sign? The answer is no. I am multiplying each side by a positive, so I'm going to keep that sign the same. I don't have to worry about it. So n, 0 times a fourth is 0. So the answer is n must be less than or equal to 0. So I have to pick a number less than or equal to 0. And I would plug back in, remember we're going to plug back into the original, not to here to check. And you have to make sure, you could pick 0, because it does have the equal to, or you could pick -1. And you're going to plug back in and make sure that this quantity is in fact going to be less than or equal to that quantity. And when you do that, I'll let you guys do that, you will know that the answer is correct. And so that's a couple examples of the process of solving an inequality with a variable on each side. Just like when we do the equation, but you got to remember when you multiply each side by the reciprocal, you got to check and see, do I switch the sign or not?